The silence that followed the destruction of the Void Render stretched across space like the breath of a dying god. Where moments before there had been the most powerful fleet in known galactic history, now there was only debris and the growing awareness that the universe had fundamentally changed. Admiral Lisa Kane stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching her tactical display as the remaining Velthari ships drifted in complete disorder. Of the original 2,000 vessels that had entered the system with such confidence, fewer than 200 remained operational, and those were broadcasting surrender signals on every frequency their communication systems could reach. Admiral, Commander Brooks reported from his tactical station. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the surviving Velthari commander." Kane nodded slowly. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing a Velthari officer whose scales had lost their proud luster and whose eyes held the hollow look of someone who had watched their entire world view crumble in the space of 6 hours. "I am Sub-Admiral Vector of the Velthari Empire," the alien said, his voice carrying none of the arrogance that had marked his species' previous communications. "I formally surrender the remainder of our fleet to your forces and beg mercy for my surviving crews." Kane studied the defeated commander with professional interest. "Sub-Admiral, are you authorized to speak for your empire?" "War Admiral Krex Thule is dead," Vector replied, the words seeming to cause him physical pain. "Command authority has fallen to me by default. I am prepared to agree to any terms you propose." "Very well," Kane said simply. "You will order all Velthari forces to withdraw immediately from Council space and return to your own territory. Any attempt to return to these systems will be considered an act of war against humanity." Vector's head bobbed in what Kane assumed was agreement. "It will be done, Admiral. The Velthari Empire formally apologizes to the Galactic Council and promises to respect all established borders." The transmission ended, leaving Kane alone with her thoughts and the tactical display that showed the scope of their victory. 3 human ships destroyed, 2 heavily damaged, against the complete defeat of the most aggressive military force the galaxy had known. "Admiral," came Captain Morrison's voice from his surviving destroyer, "what are your orders regarding the retreating enemy fleet?" Kane considered the question carefully. Human military doctrine called for pursuing and destroying fleeing enemies to prevent them from regrouping. But this situation was different. The goal had not been conquest, but demonstration. "Let them go, Captain," she decided. "But maintain long-range sensor contact. I want to know where they're going and what they're doing." Across the system, the Council fleet remained in its defensive positions around Nexus Prime, their crews struggling to comprehend what they had witnessed. Elder Nith floated in her crystalline chamber, her faceted form casting rainbow patterns that reflected her emotional turmoil. "Contact Admiral Kane," she instructed her communications officer. "The Council wishes to express its gratitude and discuss the terms of humanity's membership." The response came quickly, Admiral Kane's image appearing on the Council's main display, with the same calm professionalism she had shown throughout the battle. "Elder Nith," Kane said, "the Terra Collective is honored to accept membership in the Galactic Council. We look forward to working together for mutual benefit and security." Queen Vera of the Kethvar clicked her mandibles nervously. "Admiral, we must ask about your military capabilities. The weapons you employed against the Velthari were unlike anything in our databases." Kane's expression remained neutral. "The kinetic bombardment system accelerates tungsten rods to 12% of light speed using magnetic acceleration. The plasma lances use focused matter streams at approximately 15 million degrees. Both weapons were developed during our conflicts with the Hadron Empire. And the boarding technology? Ambassador Thex asked, his gaseous form cycling through, colors of fascination and fear. Combat transporters can insert troops directly through enemy shields using quantum tunneling effects, Kane explained matter-of-factly. We learned the technique from studying captured Zephyr Coalition equipment, Dr. Elena Rodriguez looked up from her xenobiology station, where she had been monitoring the alien vital signs. Admiral, I'm detecting extreme stress responses from all Council representatives. Their biometric readings suggest they're having difficulty processing what they've witnessed. Kane studied the alien faces on her screen, recognizing the expression she had seen many times before when peaceful species encountered human military capabilities for the first time. Elder Neath, Kane said gently, I understand this has been disturbing for your people. Warfare is not pleasant to observe, especially for species that have not experienced it directly. Nith's crystalline form pulsed with uncertain light. Admiral, we invited humanity to join the Council because we needed protection. But we did not. Understand what that protection would look like? Peace requires strength, Kane replied. The Velthari understood only force, so force was necessary to stop them. Queen Vera spoke up, her voice carrying a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. What happens now, Admiral? Will humanity establish military bases in Council space? Kane shook her head. The Terra Collective has no interest in conquest or occupation. We will maintain patrol routes to ensure the security of Council space, but your worlds remain under your own governance. Ambassador Thex's form shifted to colors that Dr. Rodriguez's database identified as relief, mixed with lingering uncertainty. And if other hostile species threaten Council territory, then they will receive the same lesson the Velthari just learned, Kane said simply. The communication ended, leaving the Council representatives to contemplate their new reality. They had gained the protection they desperately needed, but they had also introduced into their peaceful galaxy a species whose understanding of warfare was fundamentally different from anything they had imagined possible over the following days. Word of the Velthari defeat spread across the galaxy with the speed of quantum communication. Species that had been planning expansion into Council space quietly abandoned those plans. Pirates and raiders who had preyed on Council shipping found other hunting grounds. 3 separate aggressive civilizations sent formal requests for peace. Negotiations on Earth, the news of the victory was received with quiet satisfaction. Humanity had gained entry into the galactic community on favorable terms, with access to technologies and resources that would benefit their growing colonies. But in the depths of space, something else was happening that would have far greater consequences. The survivors of the Velthari fleet limped back to their home systems, carrying with them stories that would reshape their entire civilization. The empire that had built its identity on military supremacy now faced the knowledge that there were species in the galaxy far deadlier than themselves. Sub-Admiral Vectar stood before the Velthari High Council, his scales dulled with shame as he delivered his report. The humans fight like nothing we have ever encountered, he said, his voice hollow with defeat. They do not seek glory or honor in battle. They seek only victory, and they will pay any price to achieve it. The High Council listened in stunned silence as Vectar described weapons that bypassed their defenses, tactics that turned their strengths into weaknesses, and warriors who would sacrifice their own lives to ensure the destruction of their enemies. What do you recommend? Asked the High Counselor, an ancient Velthari whose scales bore the marks of countless victories. Vectar was quiet for a long moment before answering. We must never fight humans again. Not ever. Across the galaxy, the age of peaceful expansion was ending. Humanity had arrived, bringing with them the harsh mathematics of survival that had shaped their evolution on a hostile world and their expansion through a dangerous universe. The Galactic Council had gained powerful protectors, but they had also learned that sometimes the cure could be more dangerous than the disease. As Elder Nith floated in her chamber, watching the human fleet take up patrol positions around Council space, she wondered if they had saved their civilization or simply traded one form of domination for another. Only time would tell if humanity would prove to be the guardians the galaxy needed or the conquerors it feared. But one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again. The space around Nexus Prime had become a hellscape of fire and twisted metal. Velthari ships that had dominated entire star systems now drifted as burning wrecks, their proud hulls split open like broken eggs. The survivors of Krexthul's mighty fleet were learning a harsh lesson about the difference between conquest and warfare. Captain Jake Morrison guided his destroyer squadron through the chaos with the precision of a surgeon, his plasma lances reaching out to slice through enemy vessels with deadly accuracy. Each shot was calculated to disable rather than destroy when possible. But the Velthari were discovering that human mercy was often more terrifying than human cruelty. Target their weapon systems, Morrison ordered his gunner. Leave them alive, but helpless. The UES Vigilance plasma array fired again, the focused beam severing weapon mounts from a Velthari cruiser with surgical precision. The enemy ship found itself floating in space, completely disarmed, but with its crew still alive to witness the destruction of their fleet on the Void Render. War Admiral Krexthul was experiencing something no Velthari commander had faced in over 3 centuries. His tactical display showed nearly 400 of his ships either destroyed or disabled, while the human force remained almost completely intact. War Admiral, his communications officer reported with barely controlled panic. We're receiving surrender requests from 17 ship commanders. Krexthul's claws scraped against his command chair. The concept of surrender was alien to Velthari military doctrine, but then everything about this battle had defied his understanding of warfare. Deny all surrender requests, he snarled. The Velthari Empire does not yield to inferior species. But, even as he spoke those words, another human weapon was preparing to show him just how inferior his empire truly was. Master Chief Paul Anderson stood in the teleporter bay of the UES Defiance, checking his equipment one final time. Behind him, 24 of humanity's finest combat marines prepared for a type of warfare that existed only in the nightmares of species that had never fought humans. Listen up, Anderson growled, his scarred face showing the marks of battles across a dozen star systems. We're going aboard that Velthari flagship to deliver a message. Anyone who wants to surrender gets zip-tied and left alone. Anyone who wants to fight gets to meet their ancestors. The Marines nodded grimly. They had done this before, boarding. Actions against hostile alien vessels that thought their superior size and technology made them invincible. The results were always the same. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from the medical bay as the boarding teams prepared for transport. Her xenobiology studies had revealed disturbing information about Velthari physiology that she had shared with the combat teams. Remember, she said over the communication system, their nervous systems are concentrated in the upper torso. Disable. Shots to the chest will drop them without permanent damage. Anderson grinned. an expression that would have chilled the blood of anyone who did not know him well. "Acknowledged, Doc. We'll try to leave some of them in one piece for you to study," the adult. Combat transporters engaged with the sound like reality tearing apart. 25 humans vanished from the Defiance and materialized directly in the corridors of the Void Render, appearing in the heart of the enemy flagship like nightmares made flesh. The Velthari crew had no warning, no time to prepare for the impossible. Humans simply appeared in their most secure areas, moving with deadly purpose through corridors that had never known the sound of enemy footsteps. Sergeant Kelly Martinez led the assault on the engine room, her squad moving with the fluid coordination of predators that had hunted together for years. The Velthari engineers they encountered were warriors by their species' standards, but they had never faced humans in close combat. The first Velthari guard to confront Martinez died before he could fully draw his weapon. The second managed to fire a shot that scorched the corridor wall before Martinez's return fire dropped him with a precise hit to the nervous center Dr. Rodriguez had identified, engine room secured. Martinez reported calmly, "No casualties on our side." Throughout the massive flagship, similar scenes played out as human Marines encountered Velthari defenders. The aliens fought bravely according to their understanding of courage, but they were facing an enemy that had developed close combat techniques through generations of warfare against species far deadlier than themselves. Anderson himself led the assault on the command deck, his team moving through the ship's corridors like ghosts that killed anything in their path. The Velthari had built their flagship to be impregnable from external attack, but they had never considered the possibility of enemies materializing inside their own vessel. War Admiral Krexthul was receiving damage reports when the first explosions echoed through his ship. His security chief's voice crackled over the communication system, filled with a terror that Krexthul had never heard before. "War Admiral, we have borders. Repeat, we have enemy borders throughout the ship." "Impossible," Krexthul roared. "No species has boarding technology that can penetrate our shields." "The humans do," his security chief replied, just before his transmission cut off in a burst. Of weapons, Fire Krexthul stared at his tactical display as red warning lights began appearing throughout his ship. Somehow, impossibly, human soldiers were inside his flagship and moving toward the command deck with unstoppable determination. But the worst revelation was yet to come. Captain Tony Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching, as Velthari energy weapons continued to pound his ship's hull. His vessel had taken critical damage, with multiple hull breaches and failing systems throughout, sir, his engineering officer reported. "We're losing containment in the reactor core. I recommend immediate evacuation." Rodriguez studied his tactical display, noting the position of enemy ships around his damaged vessel. The Retribution was dying, but its death could serve a purpose that would end this battle once and for all. "Negative," Rodriguez replied calmly. "All hands to escape pods except essential bridge crew. We're going to ram the flagship." His crew looked at him with expressions of shock and growing understanding. They were being asked to sacrifice themselves to end a battle, but more than that, they were being asked to demonstrate something that would haunt the Velthari Empire for generations to come. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "the fusion reactor is going critical. If we ram them at full speed, the explosion will be visible from the next star system," Rodriguez finished, "and every Velthari in the galaxy will know what happens when you threaten human allies. The UES Retribution changed course. It's damaged." Hull groaning under the stress as Rodriguez pushed the engines beyond their design limits. The Velthari fleet watched in horror as the human ship accelerated directly toward their flagship, its intent unmistakable. War Admiral Krex Thule felt his world collapse as he realized what the humans were planning. All ships, destroy that vessel before it reaches us. Hundreds of energy weapons focused on the approaching human ship, but it was too late. The Retribution had built up too much momentum, and its captain had planned his course too well. Captain Rodriguez spoke his final words. To Admiral Kane, tell Earth that we kept faith with our allies. The UES Retribution struck the Void Render at 40% of light speed, its overloading fusion reactor turning both ships into a miniature star that briefly illuminated the entire star system when the explosion faded. War Admiral Krex Thule was dead, his flagship was gone, and the survivors of his fleet were floating in space, surrounded by wreckage and the growing realization that they had encountered something far beyond their understanding. For the first time in their empire's history, the Velthari knew what it meant to be prey. The Velthari fleet emerged from hyperspace like a metal storm, over 2,000 massive vessels materializing in perfect formation across a front that stretched for millions of kilometers. Each ship was a monument to their empire's power. 5 kilometers of armored death, bristling with enough weapons to level continents, War Admiral Krex Thule stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Void Render, watching the tactical displays with satisfaction. His scaled hide bore the scars of 100 conquered worlds, and his yellow eyes held the cold confidence of a predator that had never known defeat. Report, he commanded in the harsh language of his people. The Council forces have retreated too. Defensive positions around the planet as expected, his tactical officer replied. We also detect 12 unknown vessels advancing toward our formation. Krex Thule studied the sensor readings with growing amusement. The approaching ships were tiny compared to his fleet, none longer than 3 kilometers. Their designs were angular and practical rather than impressive, clearly the work of a species that had not yet learned to build proper instruments of conquest. 12 ships? He asked, his voice carrying the rumble of distant thunder. Are they perhaps lost? Unknown. War Admiral, they appear to be moving into attack formation. The concept was so absurd that Krex Thule actually laughed, a sound like grinding stone. These must be the humans the Council has summoned to save them. How pathetic that their great hope consists of such a pitiful force. Across the void, Admiral Kane was conducting her own tactical assessment from the bridge of the UES Defiance. The Velthari fleet was impressive in size, but their formation revealed critical weaknesses to eyes trained in real warfare, Commander Brooks. She called to her tactical officer. Analysis complete? Yes, Admiral, Brooks replied, his fingers dancing across his console. The enemy formation prioritizes visual impact over tactical effectiveness. They're bunched together in tight groups that would be vulnerable to area effect weapons. What about their ship designs? Heavy armor and energy shields, but they appear to be designed for ship-to-ship duels rather than fleet actions. Their weapons are powerful, but slow-firing, probably intended to intimidate rather than kill efficiently. Kane nodded, studying the tactical display. Captain Morrison, are your destroyers in position? Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system. From his command ship. Stealth systems engaged, Admiral. We're approaching their rear formation undetected. Excellent. Lieutenant Commander Carter, status on the kinetic bombardment system? Beth Carter looked up from her weapons station, her face calm despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Tungsten rods loaded and ready, Admiral. Targeting solutions calculated for maximum penetration. Master Chief Anderson, boarding parties prepared? Paul Anderson's gruff voice came from the Marine Bay. Lock and loaded, Admiral. Combat transporters are ready for immediate deployment. Kane allowed herself a small smile. Her crews had trained for this kind of engagement, studied the mistakes of species that had faced overwhelming odds and lost. But humans had also learned from the few species that had faced overwhelming odds and won. All ships, she announced over the fleet communication system. We are about to demonstrate why the Galactic Council was wise to seek our assistance. Remember your training and trust your equipment. On the Void render, War Admiral Krex Thule was growing impatient with the human delay. Signal the lead vessel, he commanded. Demand their immediate surrender. The communication was brief and to the point. Admiral Kane's image appeared on the Velthari command screen, her expression neutral as she listened to the surrender demand. War Admiral Krex Thule, Kane replied calmly. I'm afraid I cannot accept your terms. However, I am authorized to offer you one opportunity to withdraw your fleet and return to Velthari space. The silence that followed was filled with shock and disbelief. Finally, Krexthul found his voice. You dare offer terms to the Velthari. Empire, your 12 ships against our 2,000? Those are the numbers, Kane agreed. Do you accept? Krexthul's roar of rage echoed through his flagship. Destroy them all! Show these insects what happens when prey attempts to threaten predators. The Velthari fleet opened fire with a display of power that lit up space like a newborn star. Thousands of energy beams lanced across the void, designed to overwhelm and intimidate any opposition into immediate surrender. But the human ships did not behave like intimidated prey. Instead of bunching together for mutual protection or attempting to retreat, they scattered in precise patterns that suggested careful planning rather than panic. The UES Defiance took several direct hits from Velthari energy weapons, its shields flaring and sections of armor glowing red-hot. But instead of being destroyed or disabled, the massive human warship simply adjusted its course and continued advancing, War Admiral, his tactical officer reported with growing confusion. The human vessels are not responding as expected. Their armor appears to be designed specifically to resist energy weapon damage. Krexthul studied the tactical display with the first stirrings of genuine concern. The human ships were taking damage, but not nearly as much as they should be, and their formation suggested they were following a plan rather than simply responding to his attack. What are their weapons' capabilities? He demanded. Unknown, War Admiral. They have not yet returned fire. That answer sent a chill through Krexthul's spine. In his experience, prey animals always fired wildly and uselessly when cornered. Predators waited for the perfect moment to strike on the Defiance. Admiral Kane watched the tactical display as Morrison's stealth destroyers reached their target positions behind the Velthari formation. Captain Morrison, you are clear to engage. Acknowledged, Admiral. Beginning attack run. 6 human destroyers materialized out of stealth directly behind the Velthari rear guard, their plasma lance arrays already charged and targeted. The aliens had no time to react before focused beams of superheated matter began carving through their engine compartments with surgical precision. The effect was immediate and devastating. Velthari ships that had seemed invincible moments before suddenly found themselves drifting helplessly as their propulsion systems failed. Emergency alarms blared across the enemy fleet as War Admiral Krexthul realized he was fighting an enemy that understood tactics. Return fire on those destroyers, he commanded urgently. But even as his ships began turning their massive weapons toward the human attack force, Admiral Kane was implementing the next phase of her battle plan. Lieutenant Commander Carter. Kane called calmly, "You may fire when ready." Carter's finger hovered over the firing control for just a moment, then pressed down with the certainty of someone who had done this many times before. The UES Defiance's kinetic bombardment system fired, accelerating tungsten rods to 12% of light speed in less than a second. The projectiles crossed the distance to the Velthari fleet faster than their sensors could track, striking 3 enemy vessels in perfect alignment. What happened next defied everything the Velthari thought they knew about space combat. The tungsten rods, moving at relativistic speeds, passed completely through energy shields as if they did not exist. The heavy armor that had protected Velthari ships for centuries proved useless against weapons that transferred their energy through pure kinetic force. 3 massive warships, each carrying crews of thousands, simply ceased to exist as the tungsten rods punched through them from bow to stern. War Admiral Krexthul stared at his tactical display in horror as 3 of his finest vessels vanished in explosions that briefly outshone the system's star. What kind of weapons are those? His tactical officer's voice shook as he replied, "Unknown, War Admiral. Our shields and armor had no effect whatsoever." For the first time in his long military career, Krexthul felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus Prime system like wolves emerging from a dark forest. 12 ships materialized in perfect formation, their angular hulls reflecting the distant starlight in ways that made them seem almost alive and predatory. Admiral Lisa Kane stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the sensor readings as her ships took position. The alien vessels waiting for them were beautiful in their own way, all smooth curves and artistic designs that spoke of cultures more concerned with aesthetics than warfare. Admiral, reported Commander Alex Turner from the reconnaissance ship. UES Vigilant. We're detecting 847 alien vessels in defensive positions around the 4th planet. Their formation suggests they're expecting an attack, but they're not prepared for one. Kane nodded, studying the tactical display. The Council ships were arranged in neat geometric patterns that would be impressive in a parade but deadly in actual combat. What about their weapons and defenses? Energy-based systems, mostly designed for mining operations and asteroid clearing. Some have basic defensive shields, but nothing that would stop military-grade weaponry. Dr. Elena Rodriguez looked up from her xenobiology station where she had been analyzing the alien communication frequencies. Admiral, I'm receiving multiple first contact protocols from different species. They seem very eager to establish proper diplomatic relations. They should be, Kane replied quietly. Lieutenant Walsh, open a channel to the lead council vessel. The main screen flickered and suddenly filled with the image of Elder Nith, her crystalline form casting rainbow patterns across her chamber. Behind her, Kane could see representatives of other species gathered in what appeared to be an emergency meeting. Admiral Kane of the Terra Collective, Nith said, her voice carrying musical overtones. We cannot express our gratitude for your rapid response to our crisis. Kane studied the alien leader carefully. Despite her non-human appearance, fear was universal, and Kane could see it in every facet of Nith's crystalline structure. Elder Nith, we received your message about the Velthari threat. We'll need complete tactical information about their forces and capabilities. Of course, Nith replied, then hesitated. Admiral, we must warn you about the scale of the enemy force. They possess over 2,000 warships, each measuring 5 kilometers in length. Kane's expression did not change. Understood. What about their weapons and tactical doctrine? Another alien voice spoke up, this one buzzing through a translator. Queen Vera of the Kethvar moved into view, her insect features twitching with anxiety. Their weapons can crack planetary surfaces, Admiral. Their ships are armored with materials we cannot penetrate with our current technology, and they have already demonstrated their willingness to use overwhelming force, added Ambassador Thex, his gaseous form swirling with worried colors. They destroyed 3 of our research stations without warning as a demonstration of their power. Kane absorbed this information without visible concern. Commander Brooks, she called to her tactical officer, begin analysis of the Velthari specifications. I want to know their weaknesses. Commander Ryan Brooks, a man whose calm demeanor hid years of combat experience, began working at his station. Already on it, Admiral. Preliminary analysis suggests their ships are designed for intimidation and overwhelming firepower rather than tactical flexibility. The aliens exchanged glances that Kane did not miss. She had seen that look before, usually right before someone asked her if humans were insane. Admiral, Elder Nith said carefully, we want to ensure you understand the magnitude of this threat. The Velthari Empire has conquered over 200 star systems. Their military technology is centuries ahead of anything the Council possesses. How many wars have they fought? Kane asked. The question seemed to confuse the alien leaders. Queen Vera's mandibles clicked uncertainly. Wars? We are not sure we understand the question, Admiral. Military conflicts, Kane clarified. How many different enemies have the Velthari defeated in combat? They have conquered many species, Ambassador Thex replied, but most surrendered after seeing demonstrations of their power. The galaxy has been largely peaceful for centuries. Kane nodded slowly, pieces of a larger picture falling into place. I see. And how many wars has the Terra Collective fought? The aliens looked at each other with growing confusion. Elder Nith spoke first. According to your diplomatic transmissions, you mentioned conflicts with the Hadron Empire and something called the Zephyr Coalition. Among others, Kane confirmed. In the past 50 years, humanity has engaged in full-scale military conflicts with 6 different hostile species. We've fought running battles across multiple star systems, conducted siege warfare around fortified worlds, and developed weapons specifically designed to kill efficiently. The silence that followed this statement stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Queen Vera found her voice. 6 different species? In only 50 years? How is that possible? Bad luck, Kane replied with a slight smile. Or maybe good luck, depending on how you look at it. Each conflict taught us something new about fighting in space. Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her console, where she had been monitoring alien biological readings. Admiral, I'm detecting elevated stress indicators from all the alien representatives. Their heart rates and neural activity suggest extreme anxiety. Kane turned back to the screen where the alien leaders were clearly struggling to process what they had just learned. Elder Nath, with your permission, I'd like to begin detailed, tactical planning. My fleet will need to know the exact disposition of Velthari forces and their likely approach vectors. Admiral, Neith said slowly, are you saying that 12 human ships will engage over 2,000 Velthari vessels? Those are our current orders, Kane confirmed. Is there a problem with that assessment? Another long silence. Then Ambassador Thek spoke up, his gaseous form now cycling through colors that Dr. Rodriguez's xenobiology database identified as shock and disbelief. Admiral, we may have failed to adequately explain the situation. The Velthari possess the most powerful military force the galaxy has ever seen. So did the Hadron Empire, Kane replied calmly. They had ships twice the size of anything in our fleet and weapons that could sterilize entire continents. They also had a tactical doctrine based on overwhelming force and intimidation. What happened to them? Queen Vera asked, though her tone suggested she was not sure she wanted to know the answer. They surrendered after we destroyed their home fleet and occupied their capital system, Kane said matter-of-factly. The war lasted 18 months. Commander Turner's voice crackled over. The communication system from the Vigilant. Admiral, we're detecting Velthari scout ships at the system perimeter. Long-range sensors show a massive fleet approximately 6 hours out. Kane nodded to her communications officer. Elder Ninth, we'll need your ships to fall back to defensive. Positions around the planet. My fleet will advance to meet the Velthari force. Admiral, Nith said urgently, 12 ships cannot possibly stand against their entire fleet. Kane looked directly at the alien leader, her eyes holding the kind of confidence that only came from experience. Elder Neith, you asked for our help because you needed soldiers? What you're about to see is why humans are very good at being soldiers. The communication ended, and Kane turned to address her bridge crew. All ships, prepare for combat operations. This is going to be educational for everyone involved. Captain Morrison's voice came through from his destroyer squadron. Admiral, the aliens seem terrified that we're outnumbered. They should be terrified, Kane replied, watching as her ships began moving into attack formation. But not for the reasons they think. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched as far as the eye could see, its crystal walls catching and reflecting the light from 12 different suns. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in floating pods that moved slowly around the central speaking platform. Today, the air felt heavy with fear and something else that none of them wanted to name. High Commander Zeltak stood at the center platform, his massive reptilian form casting shadows across the assembled delegates. His scales were dark green with silver markings that showed his rank among the Velthari. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds. The time for peaceful talks has ended, Zeltak announced, his clawed hands gripping the speaking rod. The Velthari Empire claims the Outer Rim territories by right of conquest. You have 7 standard days to withdraw all council ships and stations from the contested systems. Elder Nith of the Nexari shifted nervously in her crystalline pod. Her people had never known war, never even imagined it until the Velthari arrived at their borders 3 cycles ago. The Nexari were beings of pure thought and energy, existing in crystal forms that could live for thousands of years. War was as foreign to them as breathing was to a vacuum? Commander Zeltak, Neith said, her voice creating musical tones in the vast hall. Surely we can reach an agreement that benefits all parties. The Council has always solved disputes through trade and dialogue. The Velthari commander let out a sound that might have been laughter if it had not been so cold. Your words mean nothing, crystal being. The strong take what they need and the weak learn to survive, or they do not survive at all. In another pod, Hive Queen Vera of the Kethvar clicked her mandibles in distress. Her insect people were builders and farmers, creators of vast cities that housed billions. They knew how to work together for the good of all, but they had never learned how to fight. The idea of violence made her compound eyes dim with worry. "What you ask is impossible," Queen Vera buzzed through her translator. "Millions of civilians live in those systems. Where would they go? How would they survive?" "That is not our concern," Zeltak replied. "The Velthari fleet numbers over 2,000 ships. Each vessel is 5 kilometers long and carries enough firepower to crack a planet in half. Your combined forces have what? 800 vessels designed for exploration and light patrol duties?" The truth of his words hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. The Council had always prided itself on peaceful expansion and trade relationships. Their ships were marvels of engineering designed for long voyages and scientific research, not war. The largest Council vessel was barely 2 kilometers long, and its weapons were meant for clearing asteroids, not fighting enemy warships. Ambassador Thex of the Etherians floated in his environmental suit, his gaseous form swirling with colors that showed his emotional state. Right now, those colors were the deep purple of absolute terror. "Commander, please reconsider. The Council offers full trade agreements, unlimited access to our technological databases, even territorial concessions in other regions." "You offer what we can simply take," Zeltak said, his tail lashing behind him. "The Velthari do not negotiate with prey." Elder Nith felt a desperate idea forming in her crystalline mind. "Wait," she said, her voice cutting through the hall. "There is another option. The Terra Collective has been requesting Council membership for 3 standard years." The other delegates turned to look at her with expressions of confusion and growing hope. The humans were barely known to most of the Council, a species from a distant spiral arm that seemed primitive compared to their own technological achievements. "The humans?" Ambassador Thex asked, his colors shifting to yellow confusion. "But their technology appears decades behind our own. Their fastest ships can barely achieve standard hyperspace velocities." "Yes," Nith agreed. "But they have something we do not. According to their diplomatic messages, they have military experience. They mention conflicts with something called the Hadron Empire and references to multiple interstellar wars." Queen Vera's mandibles clicked faster now. "Interstellar wars? Multiple conflicts? How is that possible? We have maintained galactic peace for over 6 centuries. "Perhaps," Nith said carefully, "peace was possible because we had not yet met species like the Velthari, or like the humans." Zeltak had been listening to this exchange with growing amusement. "You would call upon another primitive species to save you? How desperate you have become. Very well, summon your human friends. We will destroy them alongside your own pathetic forces." The Council chamber fell silent except for the soft humming of the life support systems. Finally, Elder Nith spoke again. "I move to vote on immediate emergency membership for the Terra Collective and a formal request for military assistance." Seconded. Queen Vera buzzed quickly. "Agreed," said Ambassador Thex, his colors now cycling through determination. The vote was unanimous. 3 hours later, a quantum communication array powered by the combined energy of 4 Council worlds sent a priority message across half the galaxy. The transmission would take 2 standard days to reach Earth, carrying with it the hopes and fears of 12 civilizations. Captain Jake Morrison was reviewing patrol reports aboard the UES Defiance when the communication arrived. The massive human warship was currently stationed near the outer colonies, its dark hull scarred from battles with raiders and hostile alien species that most of the galaxy did not even know existed. "Sir," Lieutenant Danny Walsh called from the communications station. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. It's marked as an emergency diplomatic request. Morrison frowned as he read the message. The humans had been trying to establish formal relations with the Council for years, but their requests had been largely ignored. Now suddenly the Council was offering immediate membership in exchange for military assistance against something called the Velthari Empire. "Get me Admiral Kane," Morrison ordered. Within minutes, Admiral Lisa Kane's image appeared on the main screen, from her flagship. She was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. When Morrison explained the situation, her expression did not change, but something flickered in those eyes. "How many ships are we talking about, Captain?" Kane asked. "The message says the Velthari have over 2,000 vessels, each measuring 5 kilometers in length. The Council forces have about 800 ships, but they appear to be exploration and research vessels." Kane was quiet for a long moment, studying the tactical data that Morrison had forwarded. "And they want us to help them fight this war?" "Yes, Admiral, in exchange for full Council membership and all the benefits that come with it." Another pause. Then Kane nodded slowly. "Prepare the Third Fleet for immediate deployment. 12 ships should be sufficient for initial contact and assessment." Morrison felt a familiar stirring in his chest, the feeling that always came before a fight. "Yes, Admiral. Should we expect heavy resistance?" "Captain," Kane said with the ghost of a smile, "something tells me the Velthari have never fought humans before. They're about to learn why that might have been a mistake." The transmission ended, and Morrison began issuing orders. Throughout the Third Fleet, crews that had been on routine patrol duty suddenly found themselves preparing for war against an enemy they had never seen, in defense of allies they had never met. But for humans, this was nothing new.